James, are you back?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special program. My name is Alexandria McLemore, and I will be the moderator for the first portion of this program. I am so excited for all of you to be here with our very special guest panelists. Before we get started, I, of course, want to let you all in the audience know that if you have any questions throughout the panel discussion, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box below, and we will do our very best to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So now I'm going to allow our awesome panelists to get started and introduce themselves. Judge Monica Purdy, would you like to start us off?
Sure, I'm happy to start us off. Can you hear me okay? All right, awesome. Well, thank you for having me at this particular program. I think it is so timely, especially as we close out Women's Month. Thank you for extending an invitation for me to be a panelist. My name is Monica McCoy Purdy, and I'm the presiding judge of the 95th Judicial District Court in Dallas County, Texas. And I essentially sit in a court that hears civil matters ranging from personal injury cases to complex commercial litigation. I am the first African American to serve on this court in its nearly 100-year history here in the state of Texas. Prior to being elected as the 95th Judicial District Court judge, I was unanimously appointed to serve as an associate judge in our civil district courts. I did that for about 7 years before I decided to run for office. In my role as the associate judge, I supported several of our state district courts by hearing temporary restraining orders, discovery disputes, essentially getting my training for what I do today. Prior to my time serving as a magistrate judge, I was a municipal court judge for the city of Dallas. And prior to that time, I started my law career at a law firm here in Dallas, Texas, as an associate attorney, rising to the ranks of partner. I attended Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, and then I came to Houston to go to Thurgood Marshall School of Law at Texas Southern University. So here in Dallas, been in Dallas for a long time, since 1996. Met my husband here in Dallas. We have 2 children. Dallas is home, and that is Judge Monica McCoy Purdy.
Thank you so much, Judge Purdy, for being here. Ms. Olenka Green, would you like to go next?
Okay, hi. My name is Olenka Green, and I just read about me. Olenka Green is a fierce crusader for justice. I'm a certified health educator with more than 30 years of providing health education through the African American community, with a focus on preserving African American families at risk. I have been directly involved in activism for over 20 years. Over the last 10 within the issues of police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movement. I have been at the forefront of Black Lives Matter protests and campaigns. The issue of police brutality is particularly close to my heart because I was a victim of police brutality. In 2015, I was protesting the deaths of women of color, and particularly transgender women, at the hands of police in the West End when I was arrested in the middle of one of my protests. I was walking with a poster board of women killed by law enforcement when a white woman, dark police officer ran me over with a I guess what you call one of those scooters, and pinned me against the wall. She kind of hard to talk about, maybe. But you could say that it was like 400 pounds of pressure put onto a 176-pound body. So it's still kind of like, when I think about that, I still kind of get emotional. Like when I saw that lady yesterday, the senator that went to knock on the door and she was dragged out. So kind of, still kind of does something to me. But I was charged with assault on 2 public officials, and I faced a $30,000 fine. My charges were the same ones as Sandra Bland, who died in police custody. Due to my community work, I was bailed out through community fundraising. Due to the pressure of High Black Lives Matter, my case was dropped. I was given the Dallas Peacemakers Award by the year by the Dallas Peace Center, the Sandra Bland Justice Award, and the Ambassador of Justice Award for the Cathedral of Hope. I'm a member of the SMU Women of Color. I'm also a certified and vetted member of the EPA, Black women in the EPA. And so I just hope to make Dallas a better place through social justice and environmental justice. And I have, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Green, and thank you for being vulnerable with us and telling your story. All right, and so our next panelist would be Ms. Shonda Parbu. Would you like to go next?
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be on this panel and very timely. It's so great to see so many familiar faces here today. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Shonda Parbu, and I'm a small business owner and activist. I was born in apartheid South Africa. My family later moved to Canada and finally made Texas home. We've lived here for almost 44 years. We live in Dallas, Texas with my 2 children. Actually, my 2 children are grown, so they no longer live here, but I do live here with my husband. And the inspiration for my activism actually came from my dad, who did block walking for both Bill Clinton and Obama. He's 89 years old this week. So he's been a great inspiration to me. The reason for my activism was I realized in 2016 that the South Asian community had a very low voter turnout. In 2014, only 20% of our population voted. So I knew I had my work cut out, and that was what inspired me to start my organization, which is Save Texas, the South Asian American Voter Empowerment Group. We are working on engaging and educating South Asians across the state of Texas. And I'm happy to report that in 2020, we got 76% of our population to come out to vote. We have almost 265,000 people as registered voters, and we need to double that number for us to get people to the polls this coming election. So we're hoping to register almost 400,000 people between now and 2022. We have often been a silent minority, and we can no longer sit on the sidelines. And I hope our efforts will inspire people to become a part of the political process and to let people know that we do have a voice. I think that was sort of the overwhelming message we got from our communities, that why should I get involved if nobody's paying attention? So our goal at Save Texas, our mission is to increase the political power of Texas's progressive South Asian community through education, engagement, and empowerment. And I am so glad to be a part of this panel. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing your story as well, and for bringing visibility to specifically South Asian American voters. That's great. And last but not least, we have Councilwoman Carolyn King Arnold. And go ahead, you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you. Once again, I'm Councilwoman Carolyn King Arnold. I have unmuted myself now. It is an honor to be here, of course, with all these powerful women today and to have this powerful conversation. Most of you probably know a little bit about me, at least that I'm a councilwoman and continue to be an advocate for those whose voices sometimes kind of fall between the gaps. And pretty much my history has always been that I have been that individual stepping up to the plate to fight. So some call me an advocate, and some in my education days, they would always say, here come the troublemaker. So always an activist, always carrying the petition for those who needed us the most. So at this point, I continue to struggle with the conversation that it's a larger call to action for women to stay educated so they're aware of other women who need their support. I'm one of those right now who's calling out for help, mainly because as I am a councilwoman with 4 council women around the horseshoe, I'm the only African-American around the horseshoe. And there continues to be double standards for me, whether it's around the horseshoe, in the media, just it's amazing to see how it works. I have 3 African-American males on the horseshoe, but that really doesn't have anything to do with supporting me holistically. So there's still a struggle. So I'm calling today for us to begin a larger conversation behind rallying and getting the revolution of the conversation. We have got to stop picking on women because of what they're wearing and who they dating and all of that. We need to make the main thing for our conversation. And so that's where I am today, just still calling on all of you, all of us as elected officials or just property owners, residents. We have got to stand up for ourselves and also just keep giving that support to sisters. You just don't know how it means when you at least get a phone call, a letter, a text message, 2 of you show up at an event. It means a great deal. So I appreciate the opportunity today to participate in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for reminding us that, our activism and our awareness must be intersectional, right? And as Black women, we do suffer oppression, not only because of our race, but because of our gender as well. So thank you for that. All right, everybody, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Virtual round of applause. Yes. This is so exciting. Okay, so I do have one more request of our panelists, and that's just to ensure that you try your best to keep your answers to about 2 to 3 minutes long, just to allow for as many responses from you all as possible. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. Councilwoman, I'll go ahead and start with you with this first question, but could you just talk about just the meaning and significance of Kamala Harris's vice presidency, and what do you think can really be achievable with her in her position? I think you're muted.
Turn my mic off sometime.
Okay.
Well, there are a couple of points I wanted to just highlight, but most of all, one of the signals I guess we get is symbolic of at least overcoming barriers, not only just as a woman, but an African-American woman, but also it is symbolic because it also tells us that we still have some issues out here. Because when it was announced that she was going to be on the ticket and ultimately won, you still had people who had problems with her being the first African-American vice president. And that was also among African-Americans. And so we've got a ways to go. And I'm extremely proud of her and definitely will support her and do support her. But we have to support her as sisters, and I mean like yesterday, because they're coming after her right now as we speak. And this whole thing with voter suppression and Asian hate, it's directly connected to the hate that we have, or that we're witnessing in this country. So it's quite a bit. It's a myriad of emotions, but I can tell you what I have experienced, and I'm very disappointed to hear those individuals who keep judging her because she's married to a white man, and then it goes through the whole gamut of stuff that doesn't make sense. She's an educated, intelligent African-American woman, a powerful woman who can handle the job as we speak right now. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And just as a quick follow-up, because you had mentioned how symbolic her ascendancy to the vice presidency is. So how would you respond to people, especially younger people, such as in my generation, millennials, and even younger Gen Z, who say, you know, we're happy for a symbolic change, but we're kind of tired of symbols, right? We want to get substantive actions done. How would you respond to that?
Well, one thing about it, and I think this is so important for all of us, we have to be educated. You're talking about an educated Black woman who knows her job, a woman who, if something happens right now, she can run this country. I feel confident about that. So it's more than just it's symbolism as it relates to, she is not a token. Those are old terms we used to use. She's not a token. She is highly qualified, bona fide, and ready to represent today as we speak. So once again, it's important for the young professional generation, the younger generation. You've got to have an education. It's not so much just to put something on the wall, but you have to know how to navigate in and out of different circles, and you have to know when to use what language to get what you want. And so that's why it's more than that, but the bottom line is she's highly qualified to run this country.
All right, thank you for that. Anyone else want to tackle that question?
Sure, I'll speak to that question. To just add, I echo all of the sentiments that Councilwoman Arnold has laid here today. And like many of us know that are on this panel today, and even the people that are out in the gallery, we know as women, we don't tend to step up until we absolutely know we can do the job. And I think what we have to discern from our Vice President Kamala Harris, here's a woman that is not only educated, you know, as Councilwoman Arnold said, but she held every job possible. She started out as the district attorney of her county, then ran for the attorney general of the state of California, then became a state senator. So she has put the work in to have the position that she has today, and we need to support that. I think symbolism for me, as a graduate of 2 HBCUs, it shows us that we can achieve anything that we work hard and are prepared to put the work in to do. As a mother, I have a daughter who is graduating this year. It shows my daughter that she can hold any job in the United States that a man can hold. So I think there's a lot of symbolism. The question that you asked, Alexandria, to millennials and Gen Zers, I think substance is coming from this administration. Vice President Harris and President Biden, they are very serious from a judicial standpoint about righting the ship on these federal judgeships that have gone under the Trump administration. They have made a commitment to identify young people to fill these lifetime roles in our federal courts. And I think we would be remiss if we don't understand that the it's fine to have people in a state court and a trial court, but those federal courts, when things get appealed, you have to have representation there. And I think the substance is coming to make these changes. So that's the only thing I would like to add.
Thank you, Judge. Go ahead, Ms. Green.
I'm learning how to have to do this Zoom. But what I want to say is that one of the things that I see with Vice President Harris is that not only is she speaking to the professional women, she's also giving hope to women who, like me at the age of 18 and 19, who was a single mother, struggling, just straight out of high school with 2 children. She's also giving an example of that education can take you out of poverty. Even though she was not born into poverty, she comes from a family of very elite, educated people on her mother and her father's side. I think it looks down, when we look down, down to the ones, everybody's talking about the educated, the women that go to the HBCUs. I never attended an HBCU. I went to the College of Life, or the School of Hard Knocks. But I think also is that when we look now at young women like my granddaughter, who's like 15, 16, she can see, I can do those same things. I can go to, we've had conversations about going to HBCUs, but also young women who live in substandard housing. It made us very proud to see a woman of color, be up on that platform. And it made us realize that we can do those things also. But I think in these conversations that we must also include those who will never step inside of HBCU. We must include those who are looking at her also, saying that I can obtain that. I can go to college with 2 kids and become a lawyer or a paralegal or work for City Hall, So we must include those women in these conversations and not get so caught up in those that have already obtained that. Because we have a whole bunch of young women when we talk about the millennials that due to life's choices, they may not get there right away. So to her, to Dr. Vice President Harris, she is a beacon of hope to all of us, to all of us. So I just want to say we must include those women who come from humble means, who are saying and having conversations about, wow, it's a woman of color look just like me, in the White House, and who are making these positive changes. So I want us to make sure that, like what Councilperson Arnold said also, that everybody, all women of color be included, regardless of socioeconomic status, no matter if you speak, perfect English or if you speak, something else, but all of us have to be included and not left out because we're all looking at her for leadership. So I just wanted to put that out in there. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for that, Ms. Green. That's such an invaluable perspective to have, for sure. We must include all women, right? All women of color, especially. Okay, Ms. Parbu.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you all have said. I think the one thing that's really stands out about the current administration is the diversity that they're bringing into office. And as a minority in Texas, I have not always felt like I was a part of the American quilt. And this, often I felt like there are those people in office, but I'm different and I will never be there. And now all of a sudden you're telling, just with her nomination and her election, we're able to tell little girls and women across this nation that the doors are open for everybody. And, as a 12-year-old, when I came to Texas, I just always felt like that was them, this was us. And for the first time, I really feel like we're one nation, because that opportunity did open up for people of color. And their administration is very diverse. It's very different from the administration we saw previously. And I think that speaks volumes for our country and really gives everybody a feeling that they belong.
Thank you, Ms. Parbu. And just as a quick follow-up, because I was thinking about the conversation that you and I recently had about your background growing up in being born in apartheid South Africa, and your father being able to vote for Nelson Mandela, and then later on coming here to America, being able to vote for President Obama, and then now being able to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. So can you just touch on sort of the significance of that? Just everything that you've been able to see across continents even?
Yes. So, I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and so were my parents. And growing up in apartheid, there's this sense of helplessness, like not having a voice in your own country. And so my parents would always say that we will never see a Black man be president of this country. But in 1994, me and my mom and my dad and our family was able to vote for the first Black president, Nelson Mandela. And then moving, like I said, from Canada to Texas, we faced a lot of discrimination and felt that helplessness again. And despite leaving apartheid all those years ago, it somehow lingered when people told us to go back where we came from. And Maya Harris, explained it really well when she said people often felt like her mom was less qualified because of her accent. And we faced those experiences as well. And so we almost felt like there would never be a president who would be a person of color in our own country. But in 2008, we get to vote for Barack Obama. And then one last time, we never in a million years thought that we would have a South Asian at the top of the ticket, but here it is. And I just felt like it opened up the doors for me as that 12-year-old girl who felt this discrimination when we came here to Texas, to see that. I know that other 12-year-old girls are not going to experience that. And what I really think this is about is that we kind of have to remember where we came from. So all of this was really possible because of the activism of the freedom fighters all those decades ago who fought for equal rights. Their work inspired South Africans to fight for their rights. They used them as role models to dismantle apartheid, which give me and my family the right to vote in South Africa. And that happened here in the United States. And those activists all those decades ago who fought for people of color to have the ability to vote, we didn't have permission to vote until 1965. And that gave my family and people of color the opportunity to have a voice in this country. And I hope we remember that the activism that we're doing here today will linger decades from now, but not to forget where we came from and the challenges we face to be here today. So I'm really excited about this panel because this is what we're speaking about is, we've come a long way since those days.
Thank you for that. And also thank you for just acknowledging and bringing visibility to the fact that the civil rights legislation not only, of course, enabled African Americans to be enfranchised to vote and be counted as full citizens, but also other non-Black people of color as well. So thank you for sharing that. This next question, I want to start with Judge Purdy, just about how do you balance your political views and with your jurisprudence responsibilities? How do you kind of walk that tightrope?
Sure. Well, since I'm not that far removed from my campaign, I was obviously, judges are elected here in the state of Texas. That doesn't happen everywhere. They have different ways in which they arrive at to who their judges will be. And so a lot of times when I would meet voters and talk to them about my campaign and let them know why they should vote for me, Of course, I would have people to respond that they weren't a member of my party, so they weren't sure if they could vote for me. And my reply to them would simply be, you know, as a judge, once I put on that robe, party and which party you belong to is really left behind. I don't make the laws. I am there to interpret the law, regardless of which political party that I belong to. And I want to ensure that we have a fair and just judicial system with doors open for anyone that walks through those doors. And if you are selecting a candidate in which to whom to vote for judge, you need to be assured that they're going to do just that. And that they are not going to let their party interfere with their day-to-day work. And so that's how I would describe that. That's how I'm able to separate the two. But I would not be, I guess, transparent if I did not say, as a judge, I get to bring my experiences to that bench. I get to bring my authentic self to that bench. I can't separate who I am and what I saw growing up as a child. And I'm able to spot issues and bring those experiences to maybe right a wrong that is before the court. So I do give those transparent sort of tidbits to voters that I am talking to when I'm trying to convince them as to who to support. But I think most people, regardless of which party they belong to, they want a judge there that obviously knows what they're doing. They have experience, they're committed to do the job, and they're going to be fair and impartial. And I think that's all we could ask for anybody that would appear before our courts.
Thank you so much for that. And Councilmember Arnold, I would like to ask the same of you. How do you balance your own political views and your activist views with your duties as a City of Dallas official?
I don't. I'm an advocate 24/7. It's because it's hard. Some folks think that this is a quote job. This is not really a job. It's trying to get folks to understand Dallas City Council position is not a job. It's a lifestyle for me, because from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, you're observing this. I just left a cleanup at Glendale Park and you had signs all down. I had to do, that's a major code cleanup. So then I have to get pictures of the signs that are down and the other challenges that you have. So I'm there. And so this is not a paid position to me that I have to clock in and get a paycheck. It's an obligation that I have. And so when we talk about, and I was so glad, now I know you said 2 to 3 minutes when Chandra mentioned about Johannesburg. I made sure that all my children in school studied that by Gil Scott-Heron. They needed to understand it. You know, we're not having just the problems over here. There are problems everywhere based on the color of your skin and the other things. So that's one of my words. What's the word? Johannesburg. And I believe in that. And so the struggle continues. And so I don't have time. And so when we talk about coming up, I was the child that they thought that I wasn't going to make it. And I'm not saying that I have made it, but where they thought I was going, I'm not there. And so when you talk about being understanding the struggles of housing, I didn't have to come to the council to understand that. I didn't have to come to the council to understand about a working family. I didn't have to come here to understand what it means when your mom says, you say, Mama, well, I want that. And she says, I don't have any money. And they say, we said, well, Mama, you just got paid. She says, I got money, but not that kind of money. And so you have to understand that. You understand that from that life, the School of Hard Knocks that Ms. Olenka Green was talking about. And so it's about that education along with the institutional education, I think, that continues to push me to advocate, because I was born and raised in East Austin. And that's what the label on my back is. We were not going anywhere. We were not going to be anybody. And so I didn't need to prove it to them, but I do know that my mother worked, and I understand it. She worked for a white woman, and I understand about hand-me-downs. And I also, from that same white family, received a lot of encouragement also to go to college. And so I got that from my family too. And so at the end of the day, I don't balance. I just have to do what I got to do. If I have to wake up 2 o'clock in the morning, that's what I'm going to do. So just know that I'm here and I feel better. I think if I was one of those who were trying to clock in and be an activist from 8 to 5, I couldn't make it. Y'all might as well go ahead and take me up the Golden Gate. I'm gone. So thank you for asking, but no, I don't really have a balance. I just do everything and the Lord takes me through it.
Amen.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. I kind of want to switch gears here to talk about, to touch on coalition building. And Ms. Green, I want to start with you because as we all know, intersectionality was a theory that was introduced by the Kimberly Crenshaw. And it has become, as some would say, kind of trendy as of late, right? However, you know, considering the marginalization of feminists of color, such as Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour, as you know, during their time as co-organizers of the Women's March, and more recently, right, we considered the role that some white women played in the Capitol insurrection attempt, right? And so, Ms. Green, what do you think? Like, is an interracial coalition between women of color and white women possible? Is that even something that's realistic at this point, broadly? And if so, if you know, to any white woman who does want to be an ally and to support people of color and women of color, what should they do
Well,
to
first of all,
kind of heal that chasm?
first of all, when we talk about coalitions and those young women that you named, and with this platform talking about the making of Kamala Harris, I want to throw out some women like Fannie Williams, who was the granddaughter of Susanna Nelson, who was the great granddaughter of Fannie Bell Neal, who was a formerly enslaved woman who, even though she could not read or write, she built a coalition of women who had been newly freed for them to set up how do I say this? Set up literacy tests. So women, when the 19th Amendment came, they could understand what the 19th Amendment meant as far as the test that they were going to have to take if they were going to get the right to vote. So when we're talking about coalitions, we have to talk about the ancestors. We have to talk about the women that came before, all of these women that you just spoke of. Because I think too often we talk about these young women that are here now. And so as I understand, I stand on the shoulders of great women. I stand on the shoulders of Fannie Lou Hamer. I stand on the shoulders of Septima Clark. I stand on all those, Queen Mother Moore. So, but when we talk about these women are building, coalitions and intersectionality with white women, we have to understand that when they talk about voting, they talk in history, they talk about Susan B. Anthony, they talk about all of these white women that came through the suffrage movement. They never mention us. And so until white women in this country understand that past, they said that they'd rather, black men get to vote than black women. You know what I'm saying? We've never been equal in this country to white women, and we'll never be equal to them. Now, the best things they can do is be allies. But if they really want to heal, if they really want this intersectionality, then they have to throw off the chains of white supremacy. And they have to sit down with us and have a real serious conversation about the wounds and the trauma that they have caused us. When we talk about those Confederate symbols, the daughters of the Confederacies are ones that set those up. When we talk about these laws, that even when we talk about the bathroom laws and the segregation laws going into the bathroom, these were started by white women in this country because they did not want black children going into the restroom with their children. So the conversations have to be started on some real serious trauma-built issues if we're going to move forward in this country and start talking about real intersectionality and healing. And that's a conversation that I think that America is not ready to have. And the reason I say that is because when we saw what happened January the 6th up there at the White House, it was a white woman that was trying to breach those doors. But and you saw none of those people get arrested, but the Black Lives Matter women that were out there protesting the death of Breonna Taylor. We got the brakes beat off of us. But again, until America understands that in order for us to move forward in anything, we're going to have to have equal and righteous conversations about the traumas that have happened in that country. And if not, we're still going to be just putting band-aids on a cancerous tumor. So if white women want to be allies, then they're going to have to sit and they're going to have to listen. As Alexander Van Zandt said, you're going to have to sit in it. And you're going to have to listen about how you benefited from all of these things. You're going to have to listen and see how you benefited from college, housing, tax. You're going to have to listen to what your family gave you. You're going to have to listen to how the things that white supremacy gave you. And then when they're ready to really have those conversations, then I think we can heal. And I think that we could be a great coalition. Until then, I don't think it's going to work. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you so much. And thank you for saying the names of our foremothers, our Black foremothers who paved the way for us to be where we are and for Vice President Kamala Harris to be where she is. I was going to let Ms. Parbu kind of chime in as well, but I think we lost her. I think we have time for one more comment. Did council member, did you want to touch on that, or Judge Purdy?
Judge Purdy can go on.
Sure. No problem. I think the question was about intersectionality and allyship. And the only thing that I would like to add on that is that we have seen nationally voting rights legislations being introduced in different states, even some being introduced here in Texas, to change the way in which we vote. We do know that that is going to have negative implications on people of color. And I think what we have learned this last election cycle, which is something that most Black women already knew, is that Black women tend to be a very strong voting bloc. You cannot become the president of the United States unless Black women are on your side. And that is just the way it is. We know that, the world knows that now, but now there's legislation being introduced to dilute our votes, to take away the vote, to make it more difficult to vote. And for the life of me, I just don't understand why, as a legislator, you would not make it easy to vote, but it's just the opposite happening. So it is more important now than ever that these allyships take place, because that is the only way we are going to have a candidate that truly represents our interest and our children's interest. We're going to have to figure out how to make these allyships work. Can you imagine the impact that it is going to have if legislation passes that no longer allows us to vote on the weekend, no longer allows early voting? Think about how Dallas County is going to look very differently. They're going to criminalize if you bring someone bottled water or food while they are standing in a line to vote. Criminalize it. So we have to figure out how to work together and to have these really significant allyships if we are going to get our candidate of choice elected. That's the only thing I'll add to that particular discussion.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. We are at 12:47. So, and I hate to do this, but we're going to have to wrap up this portion of the panel. Thank you all so much again. You all are just wonderful. We are going to get to the audience questions now. There was one question that kind of jumped out to me, and Ms. Parbu, I was wondering if you could answer this one, especially since your organization is focused on voter engagement. One person asked, voter suppression is real and getting worse. What can we do to fight or overturn the suppression? Will our new Attorney General act against what we've seen in Georgia? And what is getting ready to happen in Texas, in your opinion?
Yeah, so there's so many things happening that sometimes it's even hard to keep up with. So it's great to get involved with an organization. There are many organizations working on this particular one. One of the things that we are doing is keeping in close contact with our elected officials, and we are getting our community to make those phone calls to individuals that are voting on these voter suppression rules. For our community, we're going to, I think for people of color in general, I think these laws are there deliberately to make sure we don't get registered. They're going to take away the ability for us to have voter deputy registrars who are qualified people who can register people. They're trying to get rid of those individuals. And so when we're trying to register new immigrants at our places of worship, if we're trying to register people at citizenship ceremonies, there are so many different places that we normally don't find ourselves in, but communities are finding those opportunities. And so I'm gonna go back to, I think, what the most effective thing that we can do as individuals in overcoming voter suppression. Don't think about how we're going to achieve our goals statewide. Think about what you can do in your neighborhood. That is where you will make the biggest impact. You know your neighbors, when there's a new neighbor coming into your neighborhood, get them registered, have conversations with people in your neighborhood, and let them know that these are the things that are out there, because a lot of people are just not aware of the laws that are on the books in Austin or even at our federal level that might take away these opportunities for us. So get involved in your neighborhood and keep an eye on what's going on in Austin and make those phone calls. Alexandria, you're on mute.
Thank you. Oh, Lord, I'm so sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah, so just as a quick follow-up to that, so what are some other things that we can do to ensure that our voting rights are protected? And this is for anyone who would want to answer the question. I know Ms. Parbu has said that we need to make sure that we're involved and make sure we volunteer to at a phone bank and other ways like that. But what else can we do?
We can get out and door knock. We can make up coalitions. We can go out and find out what the voter suppression laws are for that state. It amazes me. Well, I'm not even gonna say it amazes me, but in the state of Texas, in the city of Dallas, it's against the law to leave your dog out without water. But now you're telling me that when Black people or when people line up to go vote, it's gonna be against the law to give them water? So you saying it's better to treat a dog better? You can treat a dog better than you can treat a person that's going to go vote, stand in line for his civil rights or his legal rights. So again, we must get out here and we must knock on these doors. We must engage those that are standing on the corner, those that are on the bus stop, those that are in the barber shop, those that, that are just standing out, and let them know, hey, you got a grandma, she vote? Yeah, my grandma votes. She's been voting ever since Dr. King. Well, let me tell you something. Next time your grandma go vote in this election in May, and she out there in that line and she get thirsty, that anybody bring your grandma water, they can go to jail and your grandma can go to jail too. Say, hey man, for real? Yeah, you need to know about these laws. So we need to go out there and we need to talk to the people and let them know that these things are going on. And once we start engaging people and really letting them know what is at stake, they become very involved. And we find out that a lot of them that are not registered to vote, once we find out and we start talking to them and letting them know, like the things that are at stake, they become involved. So we have to engage the community. And so, like Ms. Parbo said, one of the things that I do is I go out and engage into the community. I knock on doors. I talk to people, on the street corners, in the barbershops, barbecue places, and talk to them and let them know about the candidates and the laws. So it's very important that we reach the people. We reach the people and we go out, and we cannot sit inside the buildings. We have to be educated ourselves about these laws that are going out. And I'm gonna say this, it was so real to me that these same men who wrote these laws did it up on their sign that represented a plantation. So they signed this law, this draconian laws, to throw us back into slavery up under a plantation sign. So if that don't make us get out and knock on doors, then I don't know what will. So engage the people. That's how, that's how I get out, and that's how I tell all my friends. We must engage the people if we want to make sure that our civil liberties are protected.
Yes, engagement is very important. Judge, did you want to chime in on that as
Yes,
well?
I was just going to chime in that I think she's absolutely right. You have to engage the people, but I think the engagement has to come not close to election time. I think it has to be a constant engagement. We have to get in front of it. We've had momentum with this last election, and the country is so divided. I mean, you're talking about 1 percentage point. So, people can't just hear from you around election time. They've got to know that they have a space, they have a place, and that they have a stake at what is at hand. And so I think the conversation has to be constant. I can tell you that, I knocked doors before Election Day. I was targeting voters that vote every now and then, and they're tired of us coming to look for them on election time, and then they don't hear from us at any other time. So it has to be a constant conversation, and they have to feel like they have a space in the place where we are right now.
It has to be, and you're right, Judge Purdy. It has to be, and what also Council Lady Arnold said, that it has to be a 24, really like what she said, this is not something that we can do part-time. It's like we have been chosen to do this. When we go in the grocery store, we knocking and we talking, you know what I'm saying? So our survival depends on us constantly engaging. And like you said, we just can't do it during election time. Our survival is precedent every day that we wake up. We don't have the option to just say, no, I can't do it today. Because like Councilor Honor King said, you lay down to go get your hair done, somebody calling you on the phone because they need this. And I think the Most High has blessed us.
Yes.
Like, Kamala Harris has blessed us and gave us a charge to keep. And no matter how we try to get away from it, we cannot get past.
Yeah.
We cannot get past. So we have to keep on moving. And this is our lifestyle.
This is
who we are.
Yeah, I loved how Ms. Green, you were echoing what council member said, that this is a lifestyle, right? This is not just something trendy, right? Like you said, our very survival depends on it. Council member, did you want to add to that question?
I'm going to try to be brief because, we need the rest of the afternoon. But the bottom line is this. You're right. We've got to be consistent. They're coming for Kamala Harris. They are there. I mean, You know what? When we talk about a timeline, they don't have a timeline. They don't die, they multiply. And
That's
so
right.
they're always on the agenda of what they can do to take her out. And so we need to be about our business now. And so we talked also just the whole piece of education. We need to be preparing to file lawsuits because they are definitely coming to try to return to the old ways of Plessy versus Ferguson.
That's right.
We're not going back there.
Mm-mm.
And like Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so we have to now start taking the initiative right now to educate, raise money. I remember a lot of planning we did in the kitchen of Catherine Gilliam. Just go on over on a Saturday morning or evening or whatever. It doesn't cost us anything to pull together. But if we've got to pay the cost to be the boss, then we know what we have to do because we've always had to make ends meet. And so it's not about you having $1 million or $500,000. We know how to make it do what it do with $10.
Right.
And so that's all I'm saying is we have got to stop waiting because wait breaks the wagon down. We done waited so long. So they're coming after Kamala. If they're coming after Kamala, they're coming after you, Judge Purdy. You next.
Mm-hmm.
They come after me. They coming for you, Miss Olenka, because you voted. So all of us on the screen now, it's called next. Right. And so we're a problem when we speak up. We're a problem when you can read. It's a problem when you can write. It's a problem when you can think. Right. So when we realize that, we become now, as you say, activists now. So let's not wait. We don't have time to hate and wait and and gravitate. We know what the problem is. It's still
Right.
systemically, it's racism,
Right.
it's
And one of the
sexism.
things, one of the things that's so powerful when we talk about the making of Kamala Harris, I came across this book a while ago, and it's called To Negro Women, a little known black feminist manifesto. 152 women in 1951 went to Washington, D.C. to talk about and to charge the United States up with the very issues that we're talking about right now. Police brutality, poverty, lack of education, militarism, all of these things. And they were talking about the same things we're talking about right now, a call to action, a call to action. And I mean, it's a very powerful thing, but I was looking at some of the women that were on this. Bea Richardson, a profound Black actress who was in Beloved, Lorraine Hansberry, Lucille Patterson, who was a powerful advocate for justice out of New York City. But these women came together and they said, what we're talking about right now with Stacey Abrams and Vice President Harris, these women in 1951 made a call to action to say that there is a need for us as Black women in this country to stand up firm, because we know in 2021 that there are going to be draconian laws that's going to try to throw us back into slavery. So again, like you said,
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
have to have a call to action, not only to older women like me that are 52, but to the
Yeah.
younger ones that are coming up. So
Yes.
this is a cry for call of action that we
Yes.
must engage our young sisters from the
Yes. We.
courthouse to the projects. We
Yes.
have to get our sisters together if
We
we're going to
do.
survive in this country.
We do. We have to lean on each other. And thank you for showing us this. Yes, please hold it up to the screen. I want everyone to write it down, take a screenshot. We all need to make sure that we honor all of our foremothers, because this is a struggle that is as old as time, but we know that we will get through it together. Thank you all so much. We have just 2 more minutes. So real quick, I just want to kind of ask all of you, maybe in 30 seconds or less, what you all do to indulge in self-care. This has been such a difficult time with COVID, the systemic rise of white supremacy and patriarchy and everything. So Ms. Parbu, I'll start with you, but just try to, in 30 seconds or less, what do you do to try to relieve stress and to take care of yourself?
Oh, wow. It has been a stressful year, but I have to admit that getting involved in politics and making sure that our democracy survives has been the biggest release of tension in my brain. And we also have a very close family. And I think COVID has really given us an opportunity to sort of really concentrate on those that are the closest to us. So even though COVID has been really difficult, it has somehow also given us opportunities to really stop and maybe smell the roses for those that are close to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Ms. Green, what do you do for self-care?
I go to the thrift store.
Oh, yes.
I go to the
Wonderful.
thrift store. I like shopping in the thrift store, and I collect cookbooks from all across the world. I love to cook.
That is
So
beautiful.
I love to shop. That's what I do for self-care. I had COVID-19 and almost died.
Mhm.
So
Sorry.
I know what that's like. I don't take life for granted. I lost a nephew. He was 44 years old. He went into the hospital on a Thursday and he was gone on a Sunday. COVID. So self-care to me is stopping the world, locking the door, and just sitting back and taking a breather, and just shutting
Beautiful.
everything out for a minute. Because self-care is a revolutionary act, and that's what Audre Lorde said.
Ooh, yes. Yes. Self-care is a revolutionary act. Thank you for that. Judge, what about you?
Yes, I was going to say, when the weather is nice, and I guess we learned in the pandemic, we've been walking a lot, using a lot of the city's walking trails that are around here, trying to stay socially distanced, exercising. But I think, one of the sort of sweet linings of the pandemic was just having more time with family and being at home. I have a husband who travels a ton. That was put to a halt essentially when the pandemic happened. We have a daughter that's a senior in high school. Although she's missing a lot of the traditional senior traditions, it gave us more time at home with her, which I'm happy to have had, because next fall she's going to leave this nest. And so I'm glad that we have had that time. We also have a son who's about to enter high school. So we got to do a lot more things. I guess I thought I was doing all the right things by being busy and being involved in all the organizations. But when it was put to a halt, we had not had that time together like we had. I don't remember when we ever had that time together like we've had. And just allowing them, hey, you find a recipe today and we'll all work on it, doing things together. I think it was needed and a sweet lining in the pandemic for my family.
Amen.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And council member, also when you talk about your self-care, could you also mention a few resources that members of the audience and voters can kind of get plugged into in order to resist voter suppression as well?
I think quickly, just organizing, and it doesn't take much. I mean, you can get where 2 or 3 gather together, the same premise with the church. You know, you can build that voice right there in your neighborhood. And so we also got to also start, because I started when I was probably in church, but elementary school. See, the conversation is late when you're 72 about the right need to vote. You need to start getting them on the early end. So I think organizing in the neighborhood, your neighborhood associations, joining the NAACP, LULAC, those activist groups, and not for coming together just to meet and greet. You need to have an action plan that you can definitely push through. And so that's where I think we're kind of falling short. We have all of these names and organizations, but we're not filing lawsuits. We're not getting some of these individuals who are lawyers in our own community. Go ahead and file lawsuits. We know we can't pay you a lot of times the full value, but with your degrees probably it should come some commitment. And we know right now we need to get ready to file a lawsuit and work that federal level to stop voter suppression. Now, we get in there and start talking about removing the 27th Amendment, but we've given the congressional leaders the power to vote their own salaries. You know, we're paying them to keep putting oppression on us. So some of that stuff we've got to start understanding. We can change it, but we've got to stop talking about it. So that's pretty much my little 1 to 2 minutes. We can do what we need to do when we put our mind to doing it. Other than that, what do I do in terms of relieving stress? Sometimes when I drive up in the driveway and park the car, that's probably it for 5 minutes. Okay, but with the pandemic, it has brought us closer, of course, to the family. My family has always been close, but now I had an opportunity to at least renovate one portion of the house because even when I go to the yard to work, I'm still talking to neighbors. It relaxes me to plant flowers and what have you, but I'm still talking to neighbors about crime and what's going on. So that's pretty much my lifestyle. And I have to pray a lot because you have to make sure you're not to the point where, you know, folks say, well, you got too much on your plate. I don't need you to tell me how much is on my plate. I'm going to have to decide between me and the Lord what's too much. Because I'm going to keep doing what I need to do because I have to make sure I feel good about myself and I can go to bed and wake up every day feeling good about decisions I've made. So I'm just going to continue to challenge all of you, whether it's 4 people, you can make a difference. But we've got to understand we are under attack right now. We don't need to wait for 2021 we're under attack right now. So thank you for letting me kind of vent a little bit, but
yes, of course.
That's just the way I am. It just cannot. You have got to stay woke. So
stay woke. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you all. We will definitely stay in touch. Let's give all of our panelists a round of applause, please. You all were fantastic. This was beautiful. We have to find a way to do this again. And before we dismiss, I would be remiss if I did not thank the Friends of the Dallas Public Library for helping to provide the funds for this program. And we have to thank the 19th Amendment Centennial Fund for making this grant possible. So Thank you all so much again. This was beautiful, you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I don't want this to end. But thank you
All
so
power
much.
to the
And
people.
for everyone in the audience, please don't go anywhere. You can go get a snack, within 5 minutes, come right back because we are going to have the professor and attorney Cheryl Brown Watley, who will give an amazing presentation. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Thank you all.
All power to the people.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to this incredible program. We are so thankful for you all for joining us. If you are just now joining us and you missed the first part of the program, we had an incredible panel discussion. We will soon be uploading a recording of this program, so you will get a chance to watch it from beginning to end. Thank you all again for joining us. My name is Alexandria, and I am so thrilled to be introducing our next special guest speaker, Professor and attorney Cheryl Whatley. And before we begin, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her. Professor Cheryl Brown Whatley is a founding faculty member at UNT Dallas College of Law. An honors graduate of Smith College, she received her Juris Doctorate degree from Boston University College of Law, where she was a Martin Luther King Jr. Fellow. Professor Whatley began her legal career as a federal prosecutor in Connecticut, the first African-American woman to hold that position. She then transferred to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Dallas, Texas, where she was once again the first African-American woman to be appointed as a federal prosecutor. Her work as a prosecutor earned her 2 Department of Justice Outstanding Achievement Awards, a National Chief Postal Inspector Recognition Award, and commendations from various federal agencies. After the U.S. Attorney's Office, Professor Whatley went into private practice, focusing on criminal defense and civil rights litigation. She also became involved in post-conviction work, representing 4 clients who were wrongly convicted. Most recently, her client, Benjamin Spencer, whom she has been representing for more than 20 years, was released on bail when the Dallas County District Attorney's Office agreed that he had not received a fair trial. Professor Whatley has received the Dallas Bar Association's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Award, Da Vinci Institute Fellow Award for Innovative Teaching, the Oklahoma Bar Association's Ada Louise Scipio Fisher Diversity Award, the Association of Black Lawyers Ada Lois Scipio Fisher Award, the University of Oklahoma Regents Award for Superior Professional and University Service and Public Outreach, Dallas Black Women Attorneys Charlie O. Ferris Award, and the Dallas NAACP President's Award for Legal Advocacy. After more than 25 years in practice, Professor Whatley transitioned into teaching, joining the faculty at University of Oklahoma College of Law. While at OU, Professor Whatley researched the life of Ada Lois Scipio Fisher, accessing archived historical documents and original documents. She wrote the book, A Step Toward Brown v. Board of Education, Ada Lois Scipio Fisher and Her Fight to End Segregation, which was published in October 2014. Her book won the 2015 Oklahoma Book Award, nonfiction category. Professor Whatley has also presented Ada Lois's story in a theatrical format, creating a play that was presented over a dozen times by OU law students. So let's all give Attorney Whatley a virtual round of applause, please. We are very excited. Attorney Whatley, thank you so much for participating in this program. Before I let you begin though, I just want to remind our audience that, if you have any questions that occur throughout her presentation, please drop them in the chat box, and then we'll reserve the last 15 minutes of her presentation towards answering your questions, and we will do our very best to answer as many audience questions as possible. So without further ado, Attorney Whatley, you can go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and share the screen very quickly. Is it shared correctly, Alexandria?
Yep, it's looking good.
All right, thank you. Wasn't that a great dynamic presentation by some lovely panelists who are part of the legacy that we all enjoy, and part of the legacy of women who have fought racism, who have fought, these institutions of this American nation that have been designed to suppress and repress people of color. And more importantly, women whose names we recognize. Alenka Green called out some names, but there are many more whose names we don't even know. But we are the legacy of those activists. Women of color have fought different battles throughout our national history. And some of those battles have been very public, others have been very private, but they've been with the same purpose: to defeat racism and to achieve respect, equality, and freedom. Each and every woman, whether we know her name or we know only of her actions, they answered the call. They responded to the moment that history gave them. And they chose, more than they were chosen, to be emboldened and to accept that call. Women like Kamala Harris, who made certain that she was positioned to accept the call to run for vice president. But that's why I'm glad to be able to present to you this afternoon about Ada Lois Sipple Fisher, because as we learn more about her and begin to understand her biography, maybe when those moments come to us, those moments when we have to decide whether or not we will accept the opportunity and the responsibility, maybe we'll have a flicker of a memory of Ada Lois Sipple Fisher, who volunteered and said yes. Because when Ada Lois Sipple Fisher was thinking about applying to the University of Oklahoma, she would be going to Norman, Oklahoma. And Norman was a sundown town. It openly proclaimed that Black people could not be in the city limits after sundown. It wasn't a law, it wasn't an ordinance, there wasn't defined punishment, but it was such an entrenched tradition and practice that Black folks just didn't hang around. That's where she wanted to go to law school. It was the home of the University of Oklahoma. It was the, if you will, the citadel of education and the location of the only law school in the state. Now, Oklahoma is a state that is rooted in racial hatred and animus. Racial conflict pervaded its history because of its origins, developed primarily through the land rush and the, mad dash for land that is so, kind of portrayed in the movies. But it was also the destination of the Trail of Tears, the forced march of the so-called civilized Native American tribes from Southeast United States to Oklahoma, where they were placed on land given to those tribes by the federal government. And it was also the home to the most Black townships in the country. Recently emancipated individuals flocked to Oklahoma because it was the western border, gathering together to create their own communities. And attention evolved where there was jealousy. There was anger at the success of the Black townships, such that then there became essentially Black codes that were created. There was open discussion of whether or not there were too many African Americans coming to Oklahoma. And this racial conflict continued to, it permeated the state constitution, the state effort for statehood, and it culminated in 1921 in the Tulsa Race Massacre, the attack on the Greenwood section of Tulsa because of the supposed inappropriate conduct of a man who ultimately was lynched, Dick Rowland. And what happened was that the rioters who stormed this Greenwood section, a very profitable, prosperous section of Tulsa, rounded up all the Black men and put them in a holding pen, including Bishop Travis B. Sipple, Ada Lois's father. He and his wife, Maybelle Sipple, had moved to Tulsa, where he founded one of the Church of God in Christ Church. And while he was rounded up and taken away, Mrs. Sipple was left to watch their home burn, losing everything in the Tulsa Race Massacre and electing to move to Chickasha, Oklahoma, where they would have and raise their family. 36 blocks of Tulsa were destroyed through the Tulsa Race Riot. race massacre, excuse me. But that wasn't the beginning of the racial hatred that was manifested in Oklahoma. There were the lynchings, Laura Nelson and her son. John Lee, known as a postcard created, labeled the coon burning. And Benny Simmons, who was hung from a cottonwood tree, his body drenched in coal oil, put on fire, and then shot until he swung from the cottonwood tree. And then in her home city of Chickasha, the lynching of Henry Argo from the jail. He was murdered. And in fear and in anticipation of another potential Tulsa race massacre, fathers and parents took all the children and put them together in the homes, and the men stood watch, lest there try to be another attack on children and families like there'd been in Tulsa. She would remember this as a child growing up because she had lived through it. As I said, her father was a bishop in the Church of God in Christ. Her mother became an entrepreneur. One day she replied to an ad for a maid. She knocked on the front door. The woman asked her, "Are you May?" She said, "No, I am Mrs. Sipuel." And the woman proceeded to tell her, "You will never come to the front door again. As a servant, you will come to my back door." That was the one and only day that May Bell Sipuel worked as a maid. Instead, she set up a grocery store, Mrs. Martha B. Sipuel, and had goods and items right next door to her home so that they would be available there in the community. Ada Lois is the person on your right in the all black. As a family portrait. She grew up in a very segregated state. Oklahoma had all of the traditional segregation that we're familiar with, but it was also in the Constitution that children could not go to integrated schools. And so it was fundamental, it was there. So she grew up in segregated schools, but segregated schools offered all of the amenities and opportunities that they could. The band, she played the trumpet in the band when she was in middle school. She took piano lessons. She was an honor graduate of the Black School from Chickasha. She was a member of the National Honor Society. She had everything that Black communities instilled in the children that were forced to live in segregation. And she ultimately attended Langston University, the Black university for the African-American youth in Oklahoma. And while she is growing up, the NAACP, through Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall, was beginning its attack and assault on segregated graduate education. And together they filed a lawsuit against the University of Maryland and achieved the admission of Donald Murray. They then proceeded to file a suit against the state of Missouri for Lloyd Gaines. Lloyd Gaines, they were victorious. They had to go to the US Supreme Court, but the US Supreme Court said, look, Missouri, your plan for giving African-American students some tuition money to go study out of state, that's not constitutional. If they are your residents, if they are your citizens, you have to provide them a law school education in your state as you would provide it to white students. Everybody was excited. Lloyd Gaines was going to get to go to law school. The state of Missouri delayed and delayed and delayed its creation of a law school until Lloyd Gaines had disappeared. And even to this day, in 2021, no one knows what happened to Lloyd Gaines other than he had disappeared. Of course, the general consensus was that he had been lynched and his body disposed of so it could never be found. Thurgood Marshall became the architect of this plan, working with Roscoe Dunjee, who was the publisher of the Black Dispatch. Now, together, what they had done is they put out a call for a plaintiff to be the person to file suit against the University of Oklahoma. The NAACP first approached Lemuel Sipuel, Ada's older brother. He had just returned home from World War II. He was an honors graduate from as well in college. But he said, I've had enough. I've given the United States 4 years of my life fighting in war. I want to go on with my life. I don't want to put a life on hold fighting for a chance to go to school. And so instead he sought admission to Howard Law School. Ada Lois heard this conversation. She was present. She hadn't been asked, but this is a moment history gave her. And this is a moment she chose. And she stepped forward and she said, I will do it. I would like to be the plaintiff, to be the one to make the application to the University of Oklahoma. And so Roscoe Dunjee and Thurgood Marshall vetted Ada Lois, vetted her transcripts, and selected her. But Thurgood Marshall and Roscoe Dunjee, in my book, were bad men. I mean, they were bold and bodacious because Roscoe Dunjee called George Lynn Cross, the president of the University of Oklahoma, and he said, tomorrow I am bringing a Black student to apply to your law school. We're coming. We're going to be challenging the segregation laws of the state of Oklahoma. The Board of Regents knew that moment had been coming, and so they expressly instructed Dr. Cross to deny any Black applicant because otherwise it would be a violation of the Constitution and the criminal laws. So Lemuel passed the opportunity, but Ada Lois went and applied. And when she went there, they got called back into the room with Dr. Cross, and Dr. Cross said, obviously, I know why you're here. I believe in it. What can I do to help? And they said, write a letter that makes it clear to the court, clear to every judge, clear to everyone, that the only reason Ada Lois is not admitted is because she's African American, because she's a Negro, that she is educationally qualified to be a student, but that the law prohibits her admission. And Dr. Cross did exactly that. He wrote the letter clearly, almost as if Roscoe Dunjee dictated it to him. Ada Lois, however, was really pleased and, had felt a certain degree of warmth with her reception there at the registrar's office. She was greeted by white students from the University of Oklahoma, representatives of the YMCA and YWCA, who welcomed her, who encouraged her application, and who brought her box lunches so that they could have lunch with her before she returned to Oklahoma City, because there was no restaurant in Norman that would serve Black people. And so a bittersweet welcome required by the segregation laws. Roscoe Dunjee runs back to his office and he writes Thurgood Marshall, she's a natural. This woman is going to be a good plaintiff for us, because Roscoe Dunjee had also kind of calculated in there, he wanted someone who would not be a threat to the white community. He wanted someone who he felt that the white community would be willing to embrace. And so he called Ada Lois Sippuel a natural and pointed out that George Lynn Cross had been very, very helpful. It makes the news. Her denial of entrance becomes a topic of conversation and discussion and debate on the OU's campus. They start going through the process and procedures, making sure that they have done all of the kind of the legal loopholes in terms of exhaustion of administrative remedies and all of these legal steps that need to be satisfied. And then in April 1946, Thurgood Marshall, on behalf of the NAACP, representing Ada Lois Sippuel, files a lawsuit against the state of Oklahoma, the Board of Regents, saying they are denying and depriving her of her constitutional rights because they are not giving her a legal opportunity for a legal education at the same time that they are providing it to white students. Now, what's really interesting is that the question becomes, Does she want a Negro law school? Like, we have Langston University for them. So is she asking for a Negro law school, or is she really asking to go to OU? Now, what is it she's asking for, even though the pleadings themselves were quite clear and explicit that she wanted to go to OU? Whoops, wrong button. Sorry about that. And so it gets set for hearing. But before it gets set for hearing, there's an interesting maneuver by the state. They ask for more time because they're going to try to get the money from the legislature to set up a Negro law school, because that's their solution to the lawsuit. We won't integrate, we'll just give her her own law school. But in May of 1946, they could not get any funding from the legislature or the governor, and so they couldn't pursue that angle. So the case is set for hearing in July. The NAACP is excited because the judge will not continue the hearing. And they're like, okay, he won't continue the hearing because it's July and school starts in August. He must be anticipating that he's going to allow her to enroll. And so she needs to be ready to go to school in August. They go to the hearing, they're excited, they're optimistic, and they're shot down very, very quickly. Judge Ben Williams rules that for me to order the president of the university to admit Ada Lois Sipuel means that I would be ordering him to violate the law. I would be subjecting him to criminal statutes and criminal prosecution. And that I cannot do. And that I will not do. They all sat there, they listened to the oral arguments. That's Roscoe Dungy, Ada Lois, and Amos Hall, the local attorney from Tulsa, who represented her at that hearing. Thurgood Marshall was ill and unable to attend. That courtroom, I love this, that courtroom actually exists today. And when I was at the University of Oklahoma, I had hearings in that courtroom, and it just kind of tickles me that such a momentous hearing in 1946, and the courtroom still at least looked the same in 2014. And that is Judge Ben Williams. These are the attorneys who argued it: Amos Hall and Mac Williamson, the Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma. And that's the opinion, that's the entry. And these are now letters. While the case is being appealed to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, Ada Lois is getting hate mails. She got a letter that was addressed to nigger Chickasha, Oklahoma, got delivered to her house. She's getting hate mail from across the state. She also ends up getting support. She is named the honoree of the regional conference of the NAACP in November of 1946. Over 30 white students from the University of Oklahoma attended that conference to show their solidarity with her application and her admission, and actually made a presentation and sat on the stage with the Oklahoma NAACP to let everyone know that there were students at OU that welcomed her application. And then she received the award from the Chicago Defender, a Black newspaper out of Chicago. It's important because when you're getting hate mail, you need to be held up, right? Councilwoman Arnold kind of talked about that, how nice it is to kind of get something that helps to refuel you when there are those around you who would try to beat you down. Here's the Oklahoma Supreme Court that, not surprisingly, upheld the ruling and denied the appeal. And so then it was time to file a petition for writ of certiorari to the United States Supreme Court. She was going to the highest court in the land. That was granted. And so then there are other organizations that join in support of her. The American Civil Liberties Union is very instrumental, helpful, and supportive. Meanwhile, Oklahoma says, oh my God, we're going to the US Supreme Court. We need to get our argument together. So they convened again another meeting with the governor. Let's set up a Negro law school. If we're setting up a Negro law school when we go to the Supreme Court, we can say, just give us some time. We can go ahead, we're getting it ready for it. So the governor didn't have any money. They couldn't figure out how to do that. And the Attorney General is saying, we have to have something to say before the Supreme Court. Please set up this Negro law school. We can't do it. We don't have the money. You need to postpone it until the next legislative session. And so the case is going to be argued. Thurgood Marshall practices it. Ada Lois is living in Rhode Island at the time. Her husband has a job up there. She writes Thurgood Marshall, and this just is so touching to me. I will be in Washington, D.C. when the Oklahoma University case comes up, and I'd like to attend. I'd like to hear the argument. I can almost hear her voice in her head as she's writing that. I've gone through all of this. I've put my life on hold. This is now 2 years later. We are looking at January 1948. For 2 years, I haven't known how to proceed with my life. Can I come hear what these justices are going to say? Can I come hear the argument? And she did hear the argument before the Supreme Court justices, who very quickly shot down the state of Oklahoma's arguments and ruled in a one-page per curiam ruling that the University of Oklahoma had to provide Ada Lois Sipuel with a legal education as soon as, and those 3 words were critical, as soon as it provides that legal education to white students. No more delay for setting up a Negro law school, no more excuses. And they had asked during oral argument, when was the school going to begin its spring semester? And the professor had told them on January 26th is when classes begin. Well, if you're going to open classes on January 26th in a law school for white students, you have to have classes for Ada Lois on January 26th as well. The professor had also told the Supreme Court justices in response to a question that they would not be able to set up a separate law school for Ada Lois in time for that January semester. That was the statement to the Supreme Court. So when the Supreme Court said, you've got to have a school for her, after they've already told them that we can't possibly create one, the Supreme Court had to be intending that she be admitted to the University of Oklahoma. Telegrams go out. Everyone is ecstatic. The Supreme Court orders her to admit the Negro to law school. That's the interpretation everybody is putting on the Supreme Court order because of the fact they've said we cannot open a law school just for her in the remaining time. It makes Life magazine. It makes Newsweek magazine. This is now national news because it's going to be yet another blow to segregated education in the South. Ada Lois returns from Rhode Island. She's ecstatic. I'm now going to be able to study law. I'm now going to be able to put my life back. Everything is reversed, ends it, but the case goes back to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. And these justices say, implement the order consistent with our segregation laws. In other words, give her a legal education as soon as we provide it to the white students, but on a segregated basis. So having twice said, whoops, what have I just done? Having twice said they cannot find the funds for a law school, they create the Langston University's College School of Law in 7 days. They pass a resolution that said there shall be an equal law school. It adopted the course requirements of the University of Oklahoma. It hired these 3 gentlemen as the professors and faculty on a part-time basis. They got space in the Capitol building. They used the legislature's law library, and they made a declaration that the Langston University School of Law is a good faith effort. Now, twice before you didn't have resources. Twice before you acknowledged that it wasn't possible. Now, within 7 days, you issue words that you are going to say create a reality rather than perpetuate an illusion. That just by saying there shall be, you have made it be so. There is no question as to the adequacy of the facility, the qualifications. In my opinion, the opportunities at the new school are superior in many respects. And so they sent Ada Lois telegrams. They sent notices to where she was staying, and they opened up the Langston University School of Law, which, by the way, was illegal because Langston University was not an accredited institution. And an unaccredited institution cannot have a graduate program. So a degree from them would not have been recognized by any educational institution in the country. But that didn't matter. It was the way around the lawsuit. So Ada Lois and Thurgood Marshall, they said, oh, no, it's not working with us. They go back and she reapplies for admission. And this time she is again denied enrollment because the Board of Regents, the Board of Higher Regents, certifies that the Langston School of Law is substantially equal to OU. And because there is a Negro law school that is substantially equal, Dr. Cross is directed to reject her application. But the beauty of Ada Lois's victory before the Supreme Court is the NAACP said, okay, you can create a Negro law school. Well, look, we're gonna have 6 more African Americans apply on the last day of registration. 1 in education, 1 in chemistry, 1 in social work. Go ahead. How are you gonna get 3 graduate programs overnight for these students? And they're gonna keep coming. Mac Williamson, the Attorney General, however, said that can't be what the Supreme Court meant. The Supreme Court must have meant that we had to have reasonable time to set up these schools, so deny their admission. And so while this battle is going on, there is, for the first time in Oklahoma history, we were talking about allyship and collaboration, what have you, Black and white people across the state came together, particularly students, and there was a rally of 1,000 students at the University of Oklahoma where they burned paper as a mock effigy for the 14th Amendment, declaring that the actions of the Oklahoma Supreme Court had done away and destroyed the 14th Amendment, and put those ashes in a box and mailed them to President Truman. That's how disgusted they were with what the Oklahoma Supreme Court had done. And so it made the news as well. And here they are carrying the box to take to the post office containing the ashes. It made Newsweek. And as Newsweek said, whether she ever gets law training or not, she has started an avalanche of test cases. Interestingly enough, Delaware and Arkansas both immediately desegregated their graduate programs based upon the Supreme Court ruling of as soon as. They implemented and started accepting applications and admitting African-American students. There were letters of support from across the country to the organizers of that rally. And then there was also hate mail. And so the rally and the coming together really forces the Regents for Higher Education to start figuring out what are we going to do about segregated graduate education. They determined that it would take over $600,000, which today is millions of dollars, to create a separate graduate program. And so while this is going on, at the same time that we've got all of this issue of what are we going to do for graduate children, there has to be a trial in Ada Lois's case as to whether or not that law school that got created in 7 days was indeed substantially equal to the University of Oklahoma Law School. It was going to cost money. When we talk about what everyone can do, NAACP branches across the state contributed. We're talking pennies, nickels, 20 quarters, 25 cents here. They raised $8,000, $1,500, $500, and from across the state, they raised and funded the lawsuit to the tune of $25,000 in support of Ada Lois's desire, her march to becoming a law student. It was a massive march, a massive contribution of people supporting Ada Lois. Norman students raised funds. She was honored by her a sorority on Langston. People, just support and encouragement across the state. But then there was the trial. The NAACP called the dean of Harvard Law School, the dean of Columbia Law School, the dean of the University of Pennsylvania Law School, the dean of Boalt Hall Law School, 6, 7 deans of law schools from across the country to say that a law school that had one student, because in theory, this school would only have one student, could not be a law school substantially equal to OU that had been in existence for over 40 years. There's no alumni association. There's no student body to have discourse and debate. They even got so ridiculous in their trial, and it was an actual trial with witnesses, that Thurgood Marshall in cross-examination asked the dean, well, isn't moot court a critical exercise for a first-year law student? Yes, it is. I mean, that's how law students learn how to do appellate arguments. Yes, it is. Well, how would Ada Lois, as the only student, do that? Well, we'd have her argue the plaintiff side 1 month, and then the next month we'll have her argue the appellee side. It became absurd. They copied the University of Oklahoma bulletin, law school bulletin, and made it the bulletin for Langston. What are these health fees that are being charged? What are these student organization fees that are being charged? Are there student orgs for the Langston Law School? No, we just copied it. There were a couple of really crowning moments there. Henry Foster, an OU professor, called to testify by Ada Lois and the NAACP team, called it a sham, called the Langston Law School a fraud, and that the lawyers arguing on behalf of the state of Oklahoma should instead be trying to uphold the Constitution rather than to destroy it. The other piece that was pretty significant is that they called the oh, that's another, this is a piece I love too. I got to digress, I'm sorry. They talked about, well, how can she learn as the only student? And the attorney for the Oklahoma goes, well, you know, we've had people, some pretty famous lawyers who learned by themselves as the only student. And the guy goes, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And the attorney for Oklahoma goes, well, Abe Lincoln's a pretty famous lawyer. And didn't he study by himself? And the guy goes, yeah, and he studied by firelight. What does that have to do with anything with 1946? This is testimony in a court. Absurd. There's Mr. Foster yelling out in indignation. There's the bulletin. There's the list of the deans that they had come to testify. And then the ruling, the ruling that the Langston School of Law was substantially equal to the University of Oklahoma. So at that point, they had to start preparing to go once again to the US Supreme Court, but we still have those 6 students who applied in January. And George McLaurin had a lawsuit filed on his behalf. And a 3-court judge, federal panel, ruled in his favor in October of 1948, saying based upon the Supreme Court ruling in Sipuel, in Ada Lois Sipuel's case, University of Oklahoma, you have to admit him. You don't have this fake, bogus, separate but equal school, a graduate school and education. So based upon the ruling obtained in her court, George McLaurin was the first African-American to enter the University of Oklahoma, but he had to do so on a segregated basis. And so he was required to sit outside of the designated classroom space. African-Americans then began in 1949 to be admitted to the University of Oklahoma. They were given this, I love this statement to be given to each student of the colored race enrolled, we are providing separate classrooms to the fullest extent possible, as if you're doing me a favor, right? As if you're making it, but here's the rules that you need to live by, and we're trying to make it work for you. There were separate library floors created, separate library carrels, separate dining areas, things of that nature. And that these were the materials that were given. And one of the state senators said, no, a classroom is walls. They're supposed to be in separate classrooms, not just this, you need to create separate classrooms. And if I need to come down and give you definitions, I will. But what happens? is that the legislature has decided that the funding of the Langston University Law School at $15,000 a semester to pay for the faculty and the space, and no one really ever attended. There was one student who attended. It just wasn't justifiable anymore. And so they declined to fund it past the spring 1949 semester. So what happens though is that it continues. The Langston Law School literally continues until June 30th of 1949, but registration for the summer semester at OU is in mid-June. Ada Lois goes down again and she applies for admission in mid-June while there's still technically a Langston Law School. And technically her application was to have been denied. But at that point, George Cross instructs Vice President Carl Franklin to go ahead and admit Ada Lois Sipewell. Just go ahead and admit her. We'll ignore the fact that that school exists for 2 weeks. And like every bold man, he went fishing so that he would not be around to be contacted by the media. She is given her, she is ordered immediately admitted. The NAACP regional conference gives her a car because she is going to have to commute from Oklahoma City to Norman because Norman is still a sundown town. Norman is still a city of segregation. And so she enters the law school. She had written Thurgood Marshall a letter some months earlier saying, I hope that when I do get to enroll, it won't have to be on a segregated basis. That was a hope that was not realized. When she was admitted, and this is her first day of class, getting ready to go in, it was on a segregated basis. It had the kind of theater auditorium style seating, and she had to go up and sit behind the other students. There was a roped off section labeled colored, and she had to go and sit there. She was welcomed by some of the white male students who gave her their notes to help bring her up to speed for the time that she had missed. But basically she describes her time at OU as very lonely. I interviewed some of the alums and they viewed themselves as returning veterans from the war, eager to catch up with their lives. They were, focused on getting their law degrees, getting families started. They were very insular and focused on themselves. They really didn't take note of her presence. One of them even described that a time when they were supposed to work on a joint project, they had all talked about going to pick a restaurant, some restaurant there, local eating place in Norman, to discuss what they were going to do. And they were a little annoyed that she declined to go with them and would not participate. And when I asked him, did it ever occur to you that she would not have been allowed into the restaurant because of segregation? He goes, I am embarrassed to say that it did not. So she graduates. You can see her. She is the brown spot, second row, third from the right. There were a couple of other women in her class. They were not very supportive. I think this look on this woman's face as she hands Ada Lois the bar exam for her to take, which will be the exam that's required for her to become an attorney, speaks volumes. But Ada Lois passed the bar exam, and Oklahoma to this day uses what they call the Book of Lawyers, and everybody signs in, and there is Ada Lois's signature. In 1995, she was appointed to serve on the Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma, coming full circle. The institution that first denied her entry appointed her to its governing board. And a portrait of Ada Lois hangs in the Capitol, in Oklahoma City at the Capitol, to celebrate and honor the fact that, she chose this moment in history. And when we think about it, what was her victory? Because this is the one thing that always kind of challenged me as I did my research. Her victory was to go to school in a white setting when she had never before socialized, studied, or mingled with white people on an even platform. So your victory is to be in the spotlight in the most foreign of settings for yourself. But she answered the call, she chose the moment, and she saw it all the way through. So I think there's motivation and inspiration for us in her story. And as they say, that's all I got.
That was incredible. Yes, let's give another roll. virtual round of applause. That was so amazing. And Professor, I love how you said that she chose this moment in history. She chose her destiny, and there is great victory in that. So thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we will devote about 10 to 15 minutes for audience questions. And here's a great question. It says, what lessons from Ada Lois Scipio Fisher apply to us today?
That is a great question. And I think the first answer that I would give is courage. I think it takes courage to be willing to literally put yourself out there, because each of us have to make individual individual decisions. And in doing that, it's easier to stand back. It's easier to stay seated. It's easier to kind of worry about where's your comfort zone. And she embraced that. She traveled across the state with Roscoe Dungy, raising the money, doing the presentations. She got kicked off buses. She became a very public face, and she took those risks. So I think the first lesson is courage. I think the other lesson is patience. I mean, I just don't know how you put your life on hold for 3 years. And I don't want to suggest that we should be patient in our fight for our rights and freedom. I mean, clearly, this has been how many centuries of fighting. So I don't mean patience in the sense that you just sit and you don't do anything, but that if it doesn't happen the first time, you don't stop. She got denied at the district court level. Then she had to go to the appellate level. Then she went to the Supreme Court. Then she got back down to district court. Then, all of these things, each one of these things could have been viewed as a setback and caused her to give up. So maybe not patience, but tenacity, determination. I think that if we have consistency and this is what we are going to do, and we have full-time commitment, then we can affect the change. Because of what Ada Lois did in that Supreme Court ruling, University of Oklahoma opened up. Schools across the South that had segregated education had to open up their doors, and they got to go to school before she did. By the time she got to go to law school, there were about 50 African-American graduate students on OU's campus. I mean, that had to be bittersweet, right? I mean, it had to be, oh, I'm glad they're there. I'm glad everybody's got this opportunity, but what about me? And I think that's the other lesson, is that we can't get caught up in the what about me, but we have to always be looking at the broader consequence of what we do.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Our next question is, Professor, who are your role models, and what or who informed and influenced your decision to pursue law? And what can we do to combat and resist the rampant voter suppression in this present era of sustained assaults on our rights as citizens to exercise our voting rights?
I think that's what they call a loaded question, right? There's like 3 or 4 different parts to that question.
Yes.
I think when we talk about role models, we need to think private as well as public. I would have to say my mother was very much a role model. My mother confronted racism in Connecticut when the realtor did not want to let her buy property that she and my dad wanted to buy and build their house, because Negroes would not be happy living on that side of town. And my mother then went to every person who lived on that street where she wanted to buy land and said, here's who I am. My husband and I want to build a house on this acreage and raise our family. Do you have an objection? My mother had more education than any of the people she was talking to. My mother had a master's degree in social work from the 1930s. I mean, she was bad. She got a college degree at 19. I mean, and she went and said, yeah, and all they could say was, no, we welcome you. And a few weeks later, after they visited with everyone, they go back to that realtor and said, now sell it. You're the person with the objection, not the neighbors. And they bought that land and they built their house. And that was where I was raised. That is a story that I grew up with. She became the first African-American woman elected to the Board of Education in the small town where we lived, the first African-American woman elected to be a justice of the peace, an educator. and probably did not fully appreciate all that she was doing as a child growing up, but as a young adult and as an adult, become more appreciative of the impact and how that little feistiness. I mean, she had me creating picket signs when I was in middle school for pickets, for protests and demonstrations that were going on against her school, where she was the vice principal, but the principal was messing. I mean, so my mother certainly was very much a role model, but then I've been very fortunate, you know, in terms of like Constance Baker Motley, and I had an opportunity to work at the general counsel of the NAACP. But I got inspired to go into law by, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't know their names, but the news clips from the 60s of the children who had the German shepherds lunging at them with the teeth bared, and when they were part of the children's march, and Bull Connor had the fire hoses and the police dogs attacking those children. I was the same age, and I was safe in a house in Connecticut, and I couldn't really understand why that was happening to them. And my mother said, well, they're doing this, they're marching to change the laws. And I said, if they can face dogs to change the laws, then I will go to law school to make sure everybody knows that the laws have been changed. So there's some 7, 8, 9-year-old girl in Montgomery, Alabama, who inspired me to go into law. What do we need to do to fight the voter suppression? I think we do a couple of things. Number one, we let them know it doesn't work, because we will have court challenges. Whether or not we will be successful in those court challenges, particularly in the conservative court packing that existed under the Trump administration, we don't know. We don't know if our resort to federal courts is going to be as successful as it has been in the past. So yes, we need to fight on that front. We need to make sure that we are pushing for judges to be judicial in evaluating this obvious effort to undermine minority voting. But I think we need to also be supportive of new federal legislation, resurrecting and reinstituting the Voting Rights Act. And then at the same time, we need to be determined that it is not going to work. Okay, I can't give you water, but I can be a mile away with a water truck. You're not a voter yet. You're not near the voting. I can make sure that grandma has her water with her. I mean, we can't, I mean, the fact of the matter is our ancestors have shown us that we can outsmart them. We will out-strategize them. We will maneuver every roadblock that has been created. We have somehow circumvented. Now, it hasn't been easy, but we can't surrender and throw up our hands and say, oh, look what they're doing to us. You know, it may be that on some election day, you have 1,000 people out there handing out bottles of water, and dare them to criminalize everybody. Dare them to try to arrest those 1,000 people giving out water, but I don't know, but we don't surrender.
Ooh, thank you for that. I mean, I'm just, between you and the panel, I'm inspired to just go out there and do what it takes to make a change.
We have a choice.
I love it. Yeah, we don't have a choice.
We don't have a choice. We have to do what it takes. And I think what's so important is we have to, there are so many fronts. There are so many different ways we do that. You know, the fact of the matter is, what's their recourse, right? Those who would deny us voting rights, what's their recourse? They got to try to come up with some laws and legislations that suppress, right? Or they got to do a media campaign that says they weren't counted right. Or an armed guard. I mean, there's only so many ways you can try to stop people.
Yeah.
And if it's a movement that is determined and focused and tenacious, you can't stop it.
Yes, that part. Yes. Yes, I love it. This is a really interesting question. Did she have children, Ada Lois Sipple? And what do her children say she felt her legacy is?
Okay, great question. And I should have mentioned that. Yes, Ada Lois did have 2 children, Charlene and Bruce. Bruce went on to become a historian and authored with Ada Lois her autobiography. Certainly they embraced the legacy that she was instrumental in desegregating the University of Oklahoma. And I think that they would say her legacy is education. Ada Lois did not practice law very long. She had difficulty maintaining a private law practice. There was racism and sexism in trying to hire a Black woman to be a court representative. And so she ended up going to Langston University and becoming a professor of history at Langston. And so she devoted most of her adult life to education. And I believe that both Bruce and Charlene would say that education really was the tool that Ada Lois believed would help achieve equality and opportunity for people of color.
I love it. And I think that is all for the audience questions, but I do want to ask you a question, the same one that I asked the previous panel, and that is, what do you do to take care of yourself during these crazy times that we are living in?
It was so funny because when you asked that, I said, oh, thank God I won't be asked that question. Because, I hear about how people, did these exercise regimens or got into habits of healthy cooking or started expanding their recipes. And I'm like, like the first 6 months, I became a jigsaw puzzle addict. So I've got 2 Harriet Tubman jigsaw puzzles. I've got a Black History jigsaw puzzle. I've got, Black Women in Praise jigsaw puzzles. I mean, this is what I did for 6 months. But, after a while, your eyes get cross-eyed after so many jigsaw puzzles. And the pandemic and isolation didn't go away. And then, I got into a walking regimen that lasted about 5 weeks, and the pandemic didn't go away. And then I got into Zoom, and pandemic did not go away. So I have not been consistent in any of the admonitions that you receive about how to take care of yourself. I regrettably and openly confess I'm a workaholic, and that's probably what I do, and that's how I control my stress, is by working on the things that I want to work on and that kind of get me excited at the time.
Yes, and we thank you so much for your incredible service to the community. We thank you, and thank you again for taking the time to be here, and thank you for that wonderful presentation. Loved it, loved it. Again, thank you all to our viewing audience for sticking around and listening to Professor Attorney Whatley's presentation. And before I let you go, let me just again thank the 19th Amendment Centennial Fund and the Friends of the Dallas Public Library for their generous sponsorship. And of course, in true library fashion, we have assembled a book list where you can learn more about Vice President Kamala Harris and the Black women historical figures that paved the way for her. Lastly, thank you to everyone that made this possible, which is James. He's the program coordinator, and he's part of Dallas Public Library's programming team. Pam, who is the manager of Park Forest Library Branch. Ashley, she is a librarian at the Polk Wisdom Branch. And Rotina, who's the manager of the Highland Hills Library Branch, and Anne and Kristen for securing the grant. And if you have any feedback at all, please send it to libraryprograms@dallascityhall.com. Again, that's libraryprograms@dallascityhall.com. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye. Thank you again, Professor. Bye-bye.